After centuries of refining sugar to create a novel, white, and pure sweetener, we now understand that sugar is a poison in the human body. Refined white sugar is one of the worst and most toxic ingredients in the Western diet. It can have harmful effects on our metabolism and contribute to the development of numerous serious health conditions and diseases. And worst of all, it's not even vegan. In this episode, we have a bone to pick with the bittersweet truth about refined sugar and a plant-based diet. Did you know, dear listeners, there is more sugar being consumed in the world than ever before on a per capita basis? Refined, non-vegan sugar is everywhere. Let's peek behind another curtain of secrecy.
It's curtains for you, sugar.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled. Led astray. Run amok. This is what he does.
You've been had. And what makes matters worse is you're allowing it. A lifetime of nutritional deception has forced us into the fight for our lives. We are the plant-based Riot. We are here to tear down that curtain of secrecy created by our very own American food industry. A plant-based diet and a disease-free life are not out of reach. Make the choice.
This episode, we're dealing with the bittersweet truth, a bone to pick with refined sugar in a plant-based diet. Mike, sugar, a necessity or a necessary evil?
An unnecessary evil.
Ooh, I like
say.
that. That's good. That's good. Well, check this out. Today, there is more sugar being consumed in the world than ever before, even on a per capita basis. What was once a luxury, having sugar for millions, has become a staple part of their diets. That's crazy, Brian.
It is crazy.
No wonder why things are in tailspin all the time. Today, we want to thank the main show sponsor for us, which is Riot Farms. Riot Farms is a co-op of backyard farms and gardens providing greens and fruit available at the Atwater Village Farmers Market. Come check them out. You know who we're talking about, Moringa Mike. Mike, what's in season right now? What do you got going on at the market? What's new?
All right, well, first I'd like to say that I've rebranded as Huarache, which means sandals in Espanol. And I like the name because I'm a barefoot farmer, and I'm a new time runner as well. So I believe in having a light environmental impact. You know, I've gone plant-based. So what I've got new at the farmer's market is arugula. Lots of arugula. By popular demand, that's what I'm giving the people what they want. The people have spoken. They want arugula.
Give them what they want.
Yeah, but do they want your dirty feet in their arugula since you're barefooting it?
You know, they don't want that, but you know, I think people can get behind the idea of, like, you know, hand labor, no tractors, no tillage. We're building soil here. We're not destroying it. And
wow,
you know, I'm getting a pretty good foot tan too.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Well, as you guys have guessed, we are the Plant-Based Riot, a weekly commutable length, evidence-based call to action conversation about what living a healthy and disease-free life. Follow us on the gram at Plant-Based Riot. Also the Facebook page, Plant-Based Riot. And I'm Dan, father of 3, cameraman, gardener, podcaster, and just in general, kind of trying to raise 3 kids is kind of a challenge lately for the wife and I, but we're doing it, and we're doing it with greens. So we're fighting the tension and stress with greens.
I'm Mike. I'm a veganic gardener. Recently became completely plant-based, and my family is a bit confused, but they're coming around. And but I have an amazingly supportive family, from my mother-in-law to my wife and my 2 boys. They do a lot to accommodate me, and they've given me a lot of emotional support in my growing of the farm business at home, and to many backyards.
It's growing.
It's growing, yeah.
That's cool.
I'm Brian. I'm a metabolic scientist, father of 3 very exhausting children. My wonderful wife and I are trying to keep them on walking that fine green line, vegan lifestyle. It's getting harder and harder as they get older, and I have been manly and meatless for the past 24 years. So yeah,
Manly and meatless. That's good.
yeah. So we've been doing the vegan thing for a while now.
That's good. Well, you guys, I've got some questions here that I just want to start throwing at you. I'm just the naive vegan part-time cook at the house, and I'm looking at things, I'm reading things. I don't know what some of these things mean, but I know that too much sugar is bad, and that the common low-grade sugar is highly processed. So where do I turn? How do I wrap my head around this issue of like still enjoying baking with my family within the vegan plant-based lifestyle? So I have a couple of things I want to throw your way that kind of all hinge around this, and maybe at some point I just want to recap on what some takeaways are, but like just blatantly, how do you say it?
Blatantly?
What am I saying? Blatantly, thank you. Blatantly, does sugar fit into a vegan lifestyle?
Mike, you want to take that one?
No, I don't think it does. I think that...
or I guess what kind of sugar, right? Are we talking like sugar in general, or refined sugar, right? Does refined sugar fit? Which is like, that's all the sugar I was brought up with, right? That's right. We always had that, the whole bag of sugar in the pantry and everything. But
right. So the question being, like, if you are vegan, are you doing it for health reasons? If so, you can eat potato chips and French fries and popsicles and candy. That's all vegan. But is it good for you? No. And is it going? I mean, are you going to be more likely to get sick and have chronic illness? Yes, you will. So, in my view, if you're going to be vegan, you should avoid any refined sugars. That's why I think plant-based is a much more holistic approach, because it's the idea that you need to be consuming things in their whole state.
Yeah,
right, Brad?
Yeah, so, more importantly, Mike, is I don't think a lot of the listeners understand how refined sugar is made, and perhaps why there is a question of, if I eat white refined sugar, is that truly a vegan product? So, Mike, can you tell the listeners a little bit about the refining process and what is involved in that? Because I've been vegan a very long time, and this is something that I really didn't even know much about. So when I was reading into this and doing my research on it, I was actually shocked of what I unearthed. And then as I went further down this rabbit hole, I found more and more about the refining process, the system, and even how we import goods from other countries to refine sugar that is just abundant in everything that we consume within this country. Again, this being the white refined table sugar and not the natural sugars that we find in natural foodstuff. So can you tell us a little bit about the refining process so that the listeners can kind of hear about how we make table sugar in this country?
Yeah, sure. So typically refined sugar is made from sugar cane, and there are virtually all tropical countries produce sugar cane, and so to extract sugar from the sugar cane, you squeeze sugar water or sap from the cane itself, and that has it's kind of like a brown liquid. Like I grow sugar cane at home, and it's a pretty fascinating, fast-growing grass, basically. And after about a couple years, the canes become really dark in color, and that's when you can chop them up into foot-long pieces, and you can put it through some kind of like a press or like a crank that gently or squeezes all the sugar water out. And that sugar water that comes out, you could use that to make lemonade if you wanted to, but it's gonna be kind of like a brownish liquid, and you can pour that into a mold, and you can make something like piloncillo.
What is that?
That's like a Latin American raw sugar that it's like a dried cone-shaped sugar that has antioxidants and it has minerals in it, and you can grate it to use it for anything you'd like to sweeten. And so, by taking the sugar water out of the sugar cane, we're kind of, obviously we're removing the fiber, so we've got probably more sugar than we need to be healthy. We're slowly starting to run the risk of having too much. But then once you get into producing sugar cane on an industrial scale, and how does it become refined white sugar, right? So there's this, there's this need for the aesthetic value of white bleached sugar, right? And how do you make that? So it turns out we use animal bone char, typically from cow bones. And what happens is the bones of cows are sort of like kiln heated at a very high temperature, and it reduces the bone down to basically mostly a carbon base. And carbon, as you may know, is a filter. It can be used to remove things. And so typically in sugar processing plants, you'll have a gigantic canister filled with bone char, which is like a powdered kiln-fired bones. And you can run the sugar through that, and what happens is the carbon structure within the bone char will draw out impurities, which you could say are like antioxidants. They'll draw out all the color from the sugar, from the raw sugar, and turn it white. So this is how you get white sugar that you typically find at most stores. And so, typically one canister, very large canister that would fill up the size of a room to filter sugar is made up of about 7,800 animals made into a powdered form, and it lasts about a decade. Wow. So it can filter sugar for about a decade.
Whoa.
Yeah, and at a certain point, that bone char becomes basically plugged up with colorants and things that used to be in the sugar that are no longer there. And so once that bone char becomes so filled up with the things that were trying to be removed, the whole thing is kind of, dumped or sold, and could possibly even be sold as like a fertilizer product at your,
Sure.
at your box store. But basically, what's weird, where it gets weird to me, is that why do we feel the need to have white sugar? And like it turns out that bones are the cheapest way in which you can bleach and purify sugar into its white form. It gets weird when you learn that if you're going to use bones to purify sugar, they can't come from the United States.
Why is that?
So basically there's this risk associated with animal bones, and that is what's known as bovine spongiform encephalop. Let me backtrack for a second here.
We can edit that. So
yeah, it's called bovine spongiform encephalopathy. It's short for BSE, also known as mad cow disease. And so in the U.S., it's actually pretty common to feed the ground up remains of animals back to the same species of animal, right? So cannibalism, but in a sense, forced cannibalism for our livestock. So the bones of many of our livestock have prions in them. It's like when you take brain tissue brain tissue has prions, which are proteins that become highly pathogenic. If you ever come in contact with these, if you ever consume them, they will cause symptoms similar to mad cow disease, right? So basically, we've got a lot of bone material that potentially has prions in it, and if you're going to be using that to purify sugar, you could potentially be putting these prions into the sugar product. It seems crazy to think that by eating refined sugar, you could potentially be giving yourself mad cow disease. So in order to protect, United States consumers, we will essentially contract out the bones from other countries.
Other countries that aren't feeding the animals remains of the same species.
Yeah, so it's like, I guess you could say the countries where we import bones, which are known to have these are bones that don't have BSE. These are countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Egypt. And so I would say either these are countries where there isn't any brain tissue or getting in to the bones that we're using, or they're simply have better standards than we do as far as how they treat their animals and what they feed them. So it seems as though U.S. livestock is highly contaminated with these prions, and that goes beyond just cows. It's chickens and pigs and goats. So we're not allowed to use bones from this country to make U.S. sugar. We have to use bones from other countries to make U.S. sugar.
So and then ship the bones back here, and have them fired here or wherever, right?
Right.
At sugar processing plants here.
Yeah, it's strange, to be honest with you. It's really strange.
And what's really important to note about everything Mike just said is that this is an FDA law. Like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they prohibit the use of bones from animals that are grown in the United States. So therefore, our own government says the product that we're creating here to feed you and to nourish your family and your children is so dangerous. We assume that you're going to cook it and thereby reduce the threat, but we cannot filter the sugar with the bones from these animals because, refined sugar is generally eaten raw, right? You put it in your coffee, you put it in your tea. A lot of the cereals that our children eat have, they're frosted, so it has sugar on them. And if we're passing this one horrible product, which is refined sugar, through another horrible byproduct, which is bone char from American-raised animals, we're creating this product which is highly detrimental to our health. And my question is, if we're importing the bones to avoid contamination, what are we doing to regulate how the animals are being raised in other countries? Like what is the government's role in monitoring and regulating these products? Because it's very strange to me that this is how we're making refined sugar. And, the big argument in the vegan world is you're not actually eating parts of the bone. We're not consuming it, but the sugar is coming in contact with the bone. Right?
Sure.
Right.
But, so it's part of the process.
Right. But there are other alternatives. There are some companies out there that are making granular carbon, and they're using that as an alternative to animal products. So why don't we just completely remove animal products from sugar refinement altogether?
Right. Why is it refined?
Right.
Why are we refining sugar in the first place?
Right.
Yeah, true. But I would say the use of bone char is the main way to refine sugar because it's the cheapest, and I would say it's the cheapest source of purifying sugar because of all the subsidies that kind of go down the chain from, like fossil fuel to fertilizer, to grain, to animal, to bone. So we have this like immense amount of bone being swapped around across the world that makes it the cheapest way to purify sugar.
And that has been the damn theme of everything we have talked about on every episode, is the profitability, keeping overhead low and making as much money as possible at the cost of our health and our wellness. So it's just another facet of everything else we've been talking about. So for the vegan lifestyle, if we're talking, just to go back to that original question, if we're talking about is refined white sugar vegan, you could literally make the statement that, well, you're not consuming it, but it is coming in contact with bone char from animals from another country. Something else I had seen when reading about this is India is another big exporter of bones to the United States, and so is Argentina. So they're coming from all different sources.
Yeah.
So it's frightening.
Well, you guys kind of talked about it a second ago about, so why even refining it in the first place? Like historically, where did white sugar come from? Like, what is that? What's all that about? Why are we stuck with this now? Why are we even talking about it now? Like, why not let it be brown and not refined with bones? Like,
yeah, that's a really interesting question.
How did we get into this situation?
Yeah,
I would say it originated from affluence, and has been an aesthetic thing that people insist on. So now, where it once was only something afforded by the wealthy, now we have such economies of scale to produce it globally that practically everyone can get it, and it's just the way we've done it all this time. It's
tradition.
Like tradition that has caused us to continue and grow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we, I kind of dug into some of the history on refined sugar, and originally I think I was reading back to like the 1600s, where sugar and refined sugar was being used to fatten up livestock. So sugarcane was a crop that they used as like animal food and animal feed to make the animals bigger and fatter and to have more yield, which is interesting because if we look at like metabolic diseases in the present time, it's doing the same thing to humans. So what we saw sugar doing to animals in the 1600s to make them bigger and, for lack of a better term, creating obesity in animals, it's still doing the same thing in this day and age, but to a different animal, to us. So, and then there were some other things that I read where, sugar was believed to be a medicine. So as Mike had stated, the affluent population, they would get the refined sugar, which was white and pure. And we all know the history about whiteness and pureness in this country and how this country has perceived what is white and pure versus, the counterpart. Because of its purity and its uniformity, it was sold to the rich, and it was identified as a sweet salt, and they believed it had medical application, and people used it as medicine, and that goes to show how wrong we were about this product.
White man's sugar creates white man's disease.
That's right. And then it just kind of found its way throughout the rest of the world as a spice and was traded as a spice. So was it necessary? Absolutely not. But it was a new product that was presented in a different light, and it became something that was highly profitable and sought after by people who had money.
Right. So from that point, it was a business endeavor.
Yeah.
And it was the supply and demand, and it was about profit even way back then.
Yeah.
So now we're still caught up into this industry that's been created for profit.
Yeah.
So it's being refined now for profit.
Yeah,
not for our health.
Right. It's really no different than another comparison would be like the chicken nugget, right? You have chicken in its many various forms, saturating the market. You can get chicken lunch meat, you can get whole chicken, you get roasted chicken, grilled chicken, right? All these different variations of it. And then when you have all the scraps of the chicken and you create a pink paste out of that, and you add some breading to it, now you have a completely new product from the byproduct of chicken, which is the chicken nugget. So sugar kind of went down that same path, where you have these very natural and crude sources of sugar, but through refining it, you have a brand new product that is white and pure and uniformed and highly profitable. So then we have refined sugar.
Ouch.
Ouch.
Ouch indeed. Oof. It's going away from like, oh, is sugar vegan or not? It's so much more. We've managed in just a short few minutes. We've managed to get to the industry that is food and profit, right? Like it's. So I guess this is maybe more of a metabolic question, Brian. But explain to us the importance of sugar. Is sugar essential to the body? What is its purpose? Backing up to then maybe later on in the conversation, we can talk about different avenues that we can substitute this white stuff and kind of get away from this, But so essentially, what does sugar do?
So sugar or carbohydrates, as if we would identify it as a macronutrient, right, in nutrition and physiology, basically carbohydrates break down into sugars, and they're kind of an interchangeable term, right? So we get our carbohydrates from foods such as fruits, starches, beans, peas, and vegetables, right? So generally most plants contain carbohydrates. Okay. And from these carbohydrates, we extract glucose from them, which we can use to metabolize in the body. So, the most metabolizable and usable form of carbohydrates or sugar is in the form of glucose. And these are things that, glucose is what we use to basically create energy. So the energy currency of all life is adenosine triphosphate, right? So ATP. So when we metabolize glucose and we use that energy, we use that for things like muscle contraction and breathing, and to keep our brain alive. And if we look at, the metabolism inside of human cells, most of the mechanisms and machinery inside cells are to process glucose, to break it down, and to create usable energy in the form of ATP. So, the body has two ways to break down glucose, which is aerobic and anaerobic glycolysis. So we can do it through two very different and complex forms of metabolism. So it's absolutely necessary when you're sleeping at night. Your brain is functioning off of glucose. It's living off of glucose. So your liver is basically secreting sugar into the blood while you sleep to keep your brain alive. Red blood cells primarily use glucose to keep their function going. So sugar or carbohydrates or glucose, I'm just using these interchangeably, they're all incredibly necessary for physiology and for just, basically keeping our asses alive. But when we're talking about refined sugar and we're talking about the sugar that, table sugar, white sugar, there are guidelines that we have to follow when we're consuming that, because too much white sugar leads to many types of complications in physiology. So, we absolutely need sugar. It absolutely plays a role in physiology. However, the refined version of it is it's unnecessarily and not needed.
Yeah, so like I would say complex carbohydrates are your best foods to eat because they have that sugar locked up in fiber, right? So if you have
Like, what are some examples of that?
Like sweet potato and bananas and, virtually all fruits.
I see.
Beans and whole grain rice. So all of those have carbohydrates, which you need. And but because they're attached to fiber,
it's a slow release.
It's a slow release of sugar you get throughout a period of the day, as opposed to if you were to take sugar out of all of those foods, you would get the energy right away, except you'll also be doing damage to yourself. And so that by that explanation, sugar in and of itself is not bad. It's sort of the concentration of it all at once that's bad.
Well, then that's because I'm always like on the kids about don't eat that, because here's you got to explain to them, don't eat too much of these treats, even though they're vegan and healthy. There's still sugar content in these things, and so I'm always in the back of my mind wondering how much sugar is too much sugar, be it refined or not. Right? At some point, too much is too much, right?
Well, and Mike can contest to this. You have to think, if we're talking about sugar in a plant-based diet, right? So let's remove the refined component. Let's remove the bone char. Mike will tell you, through like the lens of plant science, that all plants contain sugar. So Mike, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so like through photosynthesis, plants make sugar by splitting water and then grabbing CO2 from the air, and that carbon from gaseous carbon dioxide is basically made into sugar. And within a plant, sugar goes down, water goes up. And the reason why is because sugar goes down to the root tissue to be used as storage, which is why roots tend to have an accumulation of starch, right? So it's like that's what plants do to store sugar for when they actually need it at a later date, right? So without sugar, there's no way plants could ever exist. Sugar is the core of all life on Earth, first in plants and then in animals.
Yeah.
So sugar makes the world go round. It's the
currency.
Yeah,
currency of energy.
Right.
Wow.
So that's like xylem and phloem. Xylem is the water going up, and phloem is the sugar going down in a tree.
I thought you were talking about a movie. I didn't see that, but
so now, like, if we're talking about how much sugar is too much, you have to consider, if you're a vegan and you're eating a fair amount of plants throughout your day, there's a set point, right? You're already consuming sugar, right? And depending on Mike, can you give us an example of like two different plants that have very different levels of sugar in it? Like one plant that comes to mind that has a very high level of sugar versus another plant that has almost an absence of it. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, so like I would say one plant that has very little sugar would be like dragon fruit. It's a delicious fruit, but it's not sweet. It has almost like a watery. It's almost just texture, but it has a very subtle amount of sweetness to it. Whereas a passion fruit is like nature's candy.
Yeah.
But it's got quite a bit of fiber in there too, in all those seeds. So, like as a passion fruit becomes ripe, the water content evaporates and the sugar content increases. So, you can have a more tart passion fruit if you eat it early, or you can have a sweeter passion fruit if you let it get wrinkly on the outside and let the sugar concentrate. And that's kind of like, that can be true of any fruit, if you let it dry for a long enough period.
Yeah, you can't even, you put that in your mouth and you're just like, instant, like you can feel the cavities coming or something like that.
Yeah, any fruit that you dry in a dehydrator or in the sun will become sweeter because you've basically allowed for water to evaporate, and the sugar doesn't evaporate, it stays there. So virtually any fruit will become sweeter with a drying process.
Well, you kind of talked about a second ago with the fruit, but is there a difference between like fruits, sugars that are in fruit? I know we were recently down at the school, we transitioned from a dairy popsicle kind of like non-fundraiser event every week for the kids, and we were instrumental in transitioning into a fruit bar popsicle. So it's a different type of sugar. However, there's still sugar in fruit bars. And then should we basically be concerned about the sugar that we're getting from fruits, whether it's juiced is one question, right? Which is you're removing the fiber. That is an issue. Obviously, that's clear. But
right.
The sugar that is naturally available in fruit, is this good to go? Can I ever overdose on that? Can my body take in too much sugar if we're giving fruits to kids and all this kind of stuff, or no?
Yeah, I would say generally the fructose in fruit is not a problem if you're eating it whole, because the amount of fiber that's in most fruits is going to fill you up. So basically, I wouldn't worry at all about the sugar in fruit,
because you'll be full by the time you'll stop eating eventually.
Right. It's like for example, it would, like in a bag of potato chips, a whole like a large bag of potato chips is the equivalent of 7 medium-sized potatoes. Right. And so it's easy for a person to eat just that whole bag of potatoes in like a couple of hours. But ask someone to eat 7 whole potatoes even in like a couple days, that would be very difficult to do, right? Because the fiber fills you up, and you'll stop eating, right? And then that's forcing it's sort of like forcing your digestion to slowly unpack all of that sugar over time.
And is it the same for like corn syrup, corn sweetener, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup? Do all these have different values of sugar in them?
I would say high fructose corn syrup that has been like made through corn is dangerous, because you'll find it in all kinds of processed foods with very little fiber. So you can eat a very unhealthy dose, what I would consider a toxic dose of sugar, because wherever you see high fructose corn syrup or any kind of added sugars, it's generally in a low fiber food, and so it's dangerous. I mean, I would say it's fine to have on special occasions, but day to day, avoid it.
But it's everywhere now, right?
It is everywhere. Yeah, I mean, like I would say, with any fast food or processed food, like don't bring it into your house.
Right. If
you do, then it's kind of like it's too late. The game is up. It's like don't even. I would say don't even look at it. Otherwise it'll tempt you. Like if you're in a tribal society, these are foods you would never encounter in the wild. So in a sense, we have cursed ourselves by surrounding ourselves with these edible food-like substances that, like Pollen would say, that we would be better off not even knowing they existed.
I wanted to add to that as well, and I wanted to kind of circle back around us really quick as well. So when you're talking about fructose in its natural form, right, within fruit, you guys were talking about fiber, and what fiber is going to do when you ingest that fruit is that fiber is going to help slowly release that glucose into the bloodstream. So you're going to have a release of that glucose much slower into the bloodstream, which is thereby going to cause a slower release in insulin, right? So when you have a slow release of insulin and a slow rise in blood glucose, it's much more manageable for the body, versus where if you're going to have fructose in a denatured form, like let's say like orange juice, the absence of that fiber is going to cause a immediate spike in blood glucose and an immediate spike in insulin, which we a lot of research out there shows that when you have this constant ebb and flow of both blood sugar and insulin, that's one of the mechanisms that could lead to diabetes. So we don't want those things kind of always up and down throughout the day. So the fiber, when you're eating things that have fructose in it, is beneficial. Now, when Dan, you had asked about like, well, how much sugar is too much sugar, and I asked, Mike to give me an example of like these two different fruits that have very different levels of sugar in them. You have to consider that when you're eating sugar, when we have added refined sugar that is being brought into the body, in addition to the diet that we're consuming, that's where we have to be very concerned. So, when we have sugar that's added to soft drinks or fruit drinks, or the flavored yogurts that all the kids are eating, or the cereals or the cookies or the cakes and these processed foods, those are things that have no nutritional value, such as vitamins and minerals. They have no fiber in them, and they are generally made with that refined sugar that we were talking about, with the bone char. So if you're a vegan and you're eating processed cereal every day that has sugar added to it, you have to step back and say, okay, is this refined sugar? Was this sugar, refined with the animal bone char? And thereby, is this truly a vegan dish? So we have to ask these questions, and we have to kind of realize what sugars we're dealing with here. So when you are saying how much sugar is too much sugar, and we're really eating a lot of that refined sugar because of the snack industry that has exploded because of refined sugar, that's a very different story than the natural sugars that we're getting from foods, as Mike was mentioning earlier. Okay, so fructose itself can be refined, and the body processes refined fructose versus natural fructose in a very different way. So I have a graph in front of me that kind of shows the difference between grams of sugar in a product that has natural fructose versus a product that has denatured and refined fructose. So if we were to eat like a medium-sized orange, a medium-sized orange contains anywhere from 10 to 13 grams of sugar, and we can assume that sugar is coming primarily from fructose. A medium-sized orange has fiber, it has vitamins, and its effect on blood sugar is a very slow release of glucose into the blood, a very slow rise, very controlled rise in blood sugar. If we look at another product that has been denatured and contains fructose, let's say like orange juice, if we have a 16-ounce glass of orange juice, we have 48 grams of sugar. So a much, much higher sugar because it's been concentrated. There's no fiber unless you buy the pulp, right? You get the juice with the heavy pulp. And because it's been denatured, fructose on blood sugar is going to have a very different result. So you're going to get since it's in a juice form, you're going to have a very rapid rise in both insulin and blood sugar, and that's what we don't want. So now, Mike, imagine if we're eating a diet high in plants, right, which you already said contains sugar, and then we're also drinking 3 glasses of orange juice a day, right, a refined product that has very high levels of sugar in it. Now we're kind of getting into that zone where we are consuming too much sugar, and even though the sugar is coming from a plant and not from the bone char, it still has an impact and an implication on health. And then if we went even further down that kind of path and we were drinking, let's say, orange soda, I told you one medium orange has 10 to 13 grams of sugar, where orange soda has 58 grams of sugar. So now, and we can probably assume that the sugar in the soda is going to be the sucrose, the refined table sugar, the white sugar. And that's going to have even a bigger spike in your blood sugar and a bigger increase in insulin when you drink something like that. So, Dan, you were saying how much sugar is too much sugar. You really have to be able to separate what is the natural sugar, what is the refined sugar, how much of the natural sugar am I eating a day in terms of grams, in terms of carbohydrates, and then how much refined sugar am I adding to what I'm ingesting through plants and natural food. And that's kind of where we run into complications with the development of, metabolic disorders and certain diseases, because we're just compiling refined sugar on top of natural sugar. And then that's not even including, the amount of fats and saturated fats that we're eating, which can kind of act synergistically with developing diseases. So that was very long-winded, but I felt like we kind of had to go into that and touch base on that.
No, that's great.
What I kind of got from that was that, in today's marketing, food marketing, you see a lot of marketing of protein and marketing of low-carb diets and, generally like paleo-inspired diets, right?
Yep.
But I think this is all false. This is all wrong and dangerous. In my view, or based on the research I've done, definitely check out the China study to get more in depth with this.
Okay.
But I believe the healthiest diet out there is a high carb, high fiber diet, and that is something that's generally not discussed in most food circles, regarding health. But the idea that why are people on low carb diets and high fat, high protein diets? Why is that considered to be healthy?
Yeah.
Generally, most Americans are on a high fat, low carb, low fiber diet.
Yep.
Some Americans are different, but I would say some Americans are on a high carb, low fiber diet, right? That would be like the processed food diet.
Right.
That's also quite dangerous.
Yeah.
But what is the healthiest approach? And I would say, if you peel back the layers of civilization, go back to basics, go back to hunter-gathering, what do you find? Maybe a little bit of hunting, but mostly it was gathering.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
And what are you going to be gathering? You're going to be gathering high carbohydrate roots and fruits and leaves and berries. And these are all going to be loaded with fiber.
Yeah.
And so these are going to give you the energy to run. They're going to give you the energy to, to have another day of activity.
Yeah.
So to me, the idea of a high carb, high fiber diet is something that has worked since into prehistory. And that's why I think it's still the healthiest diet out there.
But
go ahead. Yeah. If you want to be an active person, you don't want a low carb diet.
Yeah.
You need those carbs to go. You gotta hustle, right?
That's what I was going to say is, not only was diet back then dependent on region, right? Because, if you were in the northern region and you had snow 6 months out of the year, that would have a profound impact on what you ate. Versus if you were in the subtropic, areas and, the fruits and vegetables were growing all the time, that would have a profound impact on what you eat. And research has shown that where we live and the foods that we eat, it can alter the gene expression of certain enzymes that we, use to break down sugars and glucose. And, if you're living in a region where, like the Inuits, where they're eating, whale and whale blubber and things like that all the time, they're, because of their diet, they're ramping up their fatty acid oxidation enzymes. So, what we eat changes our physiology and what we're capable of what we can metabolize. And you made a really important point, is that people could eat a high carb diet because they were hunting and gathering. They were moving. Yeah. They weren't sedentary. And most importantly, they got their sugar from their food, not this refined white table sugar crap,
right? So that wasn't around then. So like we've introduced this new sweetener, which is killing us as a culture.
Right.
So and the irony in it is that we're refining it with pieces of animals that we're also over consuming, which is also killing us as a culture. So, when you peel back these layers, it's like, what the hell are we doing, and why are we spending our hard-earned money on this crap? Like, Mike, before the show, you were saying like it's just like cigarettes. You're right. Refined sugar. I mean, you go into a laboratory and you take white sugar and you pour it onto cell culture, right? These cells that you're growing in a media. The cells will destroy themselves because sugar is so toxic to the cells. I mean, we've seen this in science.
It's like salt.
It will destroy they'll go through either apoptosis, or they'll develop free radicals and destroy themselves that way, because high concentrations of sugar are toxic to the body.
Yeah, like you wouldn't eat 4 tablespoons of salt. That will kill you.
Right.
But like if you eat 4 tablespoons of sugar, it'll make you sick.
Well, right. And we are in a can of Coke. We're drinking more than 4 tablespoons of sugar, and this is something that we're drinking on top of what we're eating. And
right.
It's what the hell are we doing? What is going on?
I think that any kind of added sugar into your diet should be considered to be just as should be used just as conservatively as you would use table salt,
or as conservative as you would use cocaine, right? like it should be considered that dangerous of a substance. Like, okay, so I was looking at what refined fructose does to the body, and I was looking into. So Mike, what you said about like a high carbohydrate diet, a lot of scientists out there would think you're absolutely crazy. But when you put it in the right context, like, okay, high carbohydrate diet, you're active, you're hunting, you're gathering, you're exercising, you're utilizing those carbohydrates in a way where you're not storing them and converting them into fat. Absolutely, right. That works. But
also high fiber. You have to include that too. We're not talking about people who are like thriving on snack foods and running around in the forest.
Right.
These are people who are eating high carbohydrate foods that have a lot of fiber attached to it.
Right.
So it's like these are things like what's an example of a high carb, high fiber food? Corn and beans.
Yeah.
Or rice and beans. That's high carb, high fiber.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that farms were built on.
Yeah. And we have this plant paradox bozo that's saying, he's making a blanket statement saying that it's all bad. Well, it is all bad if you're like you said, you're thriving on snack food or processed food, and you're sedentary and you're not exercising. But if you are doing these things, then you absolutely have to have carbohydrates / sugar / glucose to help fuel those activities. And you could go even deeper into exercise physiology and be like, okay, if you're a strength athlete or if you're a high-intensity training athlete, you're going to be metabolizing almost 100% sugar or glucose. But, to your point, Mike, the people that are thriving on snack food, they're the ones that are developing diseases because of the denaturing of sugar or fructose. Fructose in many different studies, refined, denatured fructose, so absent of the fiber, has been shown to be associated with an increase in blood lipids, an increase in low-density lipids, an increase in very low-density lipids. So these are the transporters in the blood that we use to identify how much fat is in the blood. Cholesterol has been associated with it. Increases in cases of gout and uric acid are associated with people who are thriving on denatured sugar. Increases in fat being deposited in the liver, so non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is also associated with high consumption of denatured fructose and denatured sugar. Insulin resistance. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So
it seems like one of the big problems is that if you eat a lot of snack foods, it's low in fiber, so you don't get full when you eat it. so you eat a lot of it.
Right.
And then this is also associated with people who are just not very active.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
it's a combination of eating way more than your body should have been able to eat.
Right.
And you're sitting down doing nothing.
So Dan, here's a question for Dan, because he's been very quiet with that new mustachio he's rocking over there. We call him Strongman Dan now. So Dan,
There you go.
so here's a little quiz for you. So, or let me get your opinion actually. Why do you think we have created this massive dependency on the snack food industry? And okay, and it's been documented that the snack food industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, it's now like, you know, these snack companies are brand names. If you go to Indonesia, you'll see Coca-Cola signs, right? I was just telling you guys, I went to one of those big chain bulk grocery stores where you buy everything in bulk. Everything in there is filled with refined sugar or refined fructose. So what has happened to our society where we have created such a dependency on these foods that we just eat what they give us? So that's my question to you, Dan. Like, what have we lost touch with that we are now letting these major food industries make us sick with their product?
Right. We're just in general not aware of where our food comes from.
Right.
And we're losing the drive to find that out, and we're not putting enough importance on growing regionally and locally, and generally not caring about many different things in our world. And it's people are making billions of dollars on this, and they don't care about our health because they want to sell you the solution to eating this way, which their other industry continues to profit from.
Yeah, right. But like, you know, one thing that I applaud you on is because when I was living, you know, in Sierra Madre with you, not with you, but in the town, we weren't snuggling every night. We should have been, but we weren't.
We missed that.
You were trying to cook for your family every night. And, you know, you were trying to go into the garden that we have created together, pull out fresh fruit and vegetables, and go into your kitchen and, you know, try to figure out how to cook. And that's where we're losing everything is, you know, you go to Costco and you buy a $20 box of microwaved morning egg, sausage, and cheese biscuits. You've completely taken out any knowledge or cooking knowledge or knowledge of your food. You've removed all accountability of nutrition because you're relying on whatever that company designed, whatever they put in it, and you throw it in your microwave and you eat it. And I challenge our listeners, anything that is on a shelf and has a long shelf life, whether it's spaghetti sauce or soup or, you know, these microwave dinners that they're advertising as healthy, I challenge the listeners to look at how many grams of sugar are added to those foods to alter the taste. And it doesn't matter who the company is, it's filled with refined sugar.
That's crazy.
Right.
It's
Well,
crazy.
the average person's working like 2 to 3 jobs.
Right.
They don't have time to cook at home.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, like, the lifestyles that we've created for ourselves,
The pace and
yeah,
keeping up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to cook for yourself. It's the hard road.
And they know that. The food industry knows that. If you watch one of those like Stouffer's commercials, where like, you know, the Stouffer's that make like the family size stuff.
Don't sit and cook. Just get this. It's easier. It's faster.
You want to spend time with your family and you deserve it. So leave the cooking to us. It's like, let us poison you and your loved one with our crap because we live in a society where the most important thing, which is cooking and feeding your family the right nutrients, has been abolished. It doesn't. The time doesn't belong to us. So then we rely on these big companies that, make the food. We have no idea where the meat comes from. We have no idea how the gravy is made in the Stouffer's. We have no idea what regulations are on it. We just go to the store and we buy it because the commercials told us that it's wholesome.
Right. I think the pendulum is swinging. Like in 5 years from now, I think these backyard gardens are going to be more and more popular, and regionally and locally inside of a town, few miles radius. Everybody's going to kind of know a little bit more of each other. We don't really know our neighbors anymore these days, and the food is going to bring us together as it always has, and I look forward to that.
I feel like with the internet and all of like human knowledge at your fingertips, like there's no excuse for not being able to find a recipe for anything. You can cook the healthiest meals ever. Like you could cook thousands of different meals using fresh ingredients, and the recipes are all right there.
Yeah.
So to me, the exciting, well, it's kind of almost ironic that we are at a time when, we're cooking less than ever before.
Yeah.
But the knowledge to cook is more available than it has ever been.
Yeah.
So if you can just change your thinking just a bit,
right,
you can nudge yourself into cooking more and more at home.
Ignorance always dies off, right? Like,
yeah.
Could you imagine if when your kids came home from school, like as part of their daily routine, right? They come home and we're like, all right, sit down and do your homework. Like if we would shave off like maybe a half an hour of like screen time, like, or computer time, or, watching a show with our kids and be like, okay, now we're going to cook. I mean, like we're going to cook a half an hour every day. We're going to teach you how to use a knife. I'm going to teach you how to create sauces. I'm going to teach you how to roast and saute and broil. I mean, like, could you imagine like the gift that you would be giving them?
Sure.
That they could take into that. You're giving them a shield to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but you're also altering their palate, right? You're teaching them that what we make at home through repetition of making it and tasting it is better than what these fast food companies have to give you, right? So,
no, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of leading onto it where you said if sugar is associated with disease and cancers, what is the relationship between type 2 diabetes? Is there a relationship between sugar and diabetes, or is it indirect?
Okay, so that's a good question, and you kind of touched on another thing there with cancer. So let me answer both of those independently of each other. So sugar's association with cancer, it's kind of been long understood that in medical research that when cancer cells start to divide and kind of like they lose their regulation and their control of division, one of the ways that they accelerate their division and start to make this mass, right, cellular mass, is through glucose, using high levels of sugar. So if there's a high level of sugar constantly being delivered, let's say exogenously through diet, or a large sugar flux going into the cell, then cancer cells will use that to help themselves divide and metastasize. So if you're in the hospital and you're receiving treatment as a cancer patient, one of the things they'll do is they'll put you on a low glucose, low sugar, low carbohydrate diet to kind of slow down that process. So, recent research has been showing that actually amino acids might play a bigger role in the development of cancer cells as far as the development of cancer mass, but sugar or glucose will still accelerate the division. So research is still kind of being worked on with that. And of course, every type of cancer responds differently and will use sugar differently. Some cancer cells you can starve sugar and they'll stop growing. Some cancer cells you can starve them with sugar and they'll still continue to divide. So very, very complicated pathophysiology.
One point I'd like to make.
Yeah.
One point I'd like to make is that say you have cancer, should you avoid sugar or should you avoid carbohydrates? I would say if you're eating a high carb, high fiber diet, you're also getting a high level of antioxidants. You're getting a high level of these cancer fighting properties.
Yes, true.
Whereas if you rely more on animal protein or high sources of protein and fat, you're going to be getting the opposite. You're going to be getting things that promote cancer and tumor formation. So I would say that the even with cancer, the best ways to go into remission is to be eating a plant-based diet.
Right.
Because I mean, like, from what I've read, your body's going to try and maintain normal levels of glucose no matter what you do.
That's true.
And cancer will use that to grow.
That's
However,
don't add to it.
Don't add to it. If you're constantly eating fruits and vegetables, you're getting those cancer-fighting antioxidants too, and that's going to really suppress tumor growth.
Yeah, and when individuals are undergoing chemotherapy to help fight cancer, they do alter the diet again and ask that people eat a low carbohydrate diet and a high protein diet. And the rationale for that is high protein diet will help rebuild kind of the proteins and the structures that were destroyed through chemotherapy. So there are these different approaches to it. So now in type 2 diabetes, the relationship with refined sugar is that, excess sugar leads to excess calories. And if you're not active, then that sugar and the addition of calories could lead to obesity, and therefore obesity could lead to pre-diabetes. Now, in diabetes, sugar is it's a synergist. So if you're inactive, you're eating refined sugar. You're also eating, animal products that have high levels of saturated fat. So, meat and cheese and milk and, dairy. Sugar and saturated fat will act synergistically to kind of start creating prediabetes, which will then lead into various forms of diabetes. So some of the mechanisms that they believe exist are that saturated fat, high levels of saturated fat lead to insulin resistance. And then when you have insulin resistance, that blood sugar can't enter into cells that are basically dependent on the sugar. And then you start to get a rise in blood sugar, which then becomes exacerbated through diet, right? So if you're eating a lot of refined sugar, a lot of refined fructose, then when you have insulin resistance, you're contributing directly to that high level of blood glucose, which is just going to continue to rise, and that will lead to all other sorts of complications. And interestingly, diabetes and cancer, there's a lot of crosstalk between those diseases. So, one might be developing in a little more of an obvious fashion, while something could be, maybe diabetes is developing and it's a bit more obvious. We can, take measurements and say, yes, in the blood we see this, which means you're developing diabetes. And then underlining that, you could have cancer developing, which might take another 10 to 15 years to develop. But the two diseases are communicating synergistically. So yes,
like if you have like a person with high levels of blood sugar, and yet that sugar can't seem to get into their muscles because of insulin resistance.
Yes,
you're going to have a person who is lethargic and they don't have the energy to be active.
Yeah,
and yet their blood sugar is sky high.
Yeah.
And that's like the hallmark of prediabetes and diabetes.
That's right. And Dan, you had asked me, like, are there alternatives to this? Like, why the refined sugar? Why is this such a staple in the American diet? And Mike had said, well, we subsidize it, so that's absolutely correct. The government does subsidize sugar cane and the basically development of refined sugar. So and
you can bastardize the cuisine from every culture by adding additional sugar to it.
Yeah.
You get Chinese food in the US.
Yeah.
You're getting bastardized versions of Chinese food because they've added all this extra sugar. You got the sweet sauce.
Yes.
You go to China and it's nothing like that.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And because they know the American palate loves sugar.
And it's addicting.
That. Yeah.
You're going to come back for more.
Yeah. So, just kind of like
sugar sells
a closure
among other things.
Are there alternatives? Yes. I told you guys earlier that there are some forms of sugar that, or some forms of sweeteners that we can buy that have, better. They're just better. They're healthier for us. So, for example, I found this graph that was looking at antioxidants in these sweeteners, right? And they measured them by millimoles per serving. So, if we compare date sugar to just our average table sugar, refined white sugar, date sugar has about 2.5 millimoles of antioxidants per serving. Where if we look at table sugar, it has like 0.003 millimoles per serving. So that's a robust difference between antioxidants in one type of sugar versus the table sugar that is refined with bone char. There's other sources like molasses and barley malt syrup and brown rice malt syrup and dark brown sugar and maple syrup that all have higher levels of antioxidants and vitamins and minerals than table sugar. But for some reason, table sugar, it wins time and time again. So, I ask you guys, why do you think that these other sugars aren't put in the foreground, and we're not advertising saying, hey, this is a healthier source of sugar. You don't need as much of it. It has positive, if you're eating, date sugar and it has high levels of antioxidants and you are developing some sort of chronic disease, those antioxidants are going to be beneficial. Or if you're not developing a disease, those antioxidants are going to be preventative. So I'm going to toss that question back to you guys. Why, if there's all these better, healthier options out there and more beneficial sweeteners, then why aren't they in the foreground? Why are they hidden in the shadows? And white table sugar that is passed through bone char that is questionably vegan, why are we consuming that?
I mean, I think we have to at some point acknowledge our government and the industry that is the American food industry, and say maybe we need to get more molasses and raw sugar cane and
piloncillo.
Yeah, piloncillo and get these lobbyists working out there, but follow the money, right? Follow the money, and this is why where we're at, and it's going to take audiences like this one to just vote with their wallet, right? I mean, that's ultimately what all of these topics come down to, right?
So what you're telling me is we all have to get our molasses in gear and start voting with our wallets.
There you go. Get that molasses in gear.
It's not enough to just be vegan. I think a whole foods plant-based diet is really the accurate
of course
target to hit, because it really is about day to day eating foods in their whole state.
Yeah.
And when you do that, all these problems go away.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think your more hardline vegans that have been living this lifestyle for a long time, I think they're very well aware of this. Maybe we offered some things, through metabolism and through medical science and through plant science, we may have offered some new insight. But for people that are kind of new to the lifestyle, which is a growing population, every day there are more people converting or considering the conversion. They may not know this, and this is important to know. Where if you're going into the gas station and you're buying Mountain Dew, you need to know the ramifications of what refined sugar is going to do to your body, right? If you're eating a lot of plants throughout the day and you're a new vegan and you're already consuming more than enough carbohydrates, more than enough sugar, and then you're further increasing the consumption of these sugars because you're drinking products that are refined sugar and very high in sugar, not only are you kind of undoing the healthy lifestyle that you're trying to obtain with veganism, but you're also purchasing a product that may have been passed through animal bones, right? I'm just trying to bring this full circle. And, maybe you guys can answer this for me. If you're not consuming the char, but the char is interacting with the sugar, is it a vegan product? Is it not a vegan product?
It is, right.
Yeah.
Same thing with the, remember Guinness, I got to look this up again, but somewhere around 2014, 2015, Guinness stopped filtering with fish scales.
Right.
Like they've been using that for whatever, a couple hundred years or whatever it was. And then they're like, hey, our brew is now vegan.
Yeah.
So no longer using fish scales. So yeah, it's a part of the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's part of the process, it doesn't count for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, you want to add to that?
The dangers of prions are huge. And so although humans getting something similar to mad cow disease is rare, it's a scary thing that's completely irreversible. So first of all, prions are proteins that come from brain tissue. Everyone has prions in their brain, right? It's natural, and it's what keeps your brain healthy. But those prions, they should stay there within your brain, right? As soon as they make their way into the food supply, they can be chopped up into 1,000 pieces, and they'll reassemble if you consume them.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that they're not destroyed by heat.
Yeah.
So like whether you're consuming it raw or cooked, if you have any sort of prion exposed to you in your food supply, it's an irreversible disease that can develop over a period of years.
Yeah.
So you may not know you have it until years later.
Yeah.
But basically, because of the way in which we raise animals in this country, we put our population at risk, and it's completely insane.
Yeah, it is, and as Dan said earlier, it's all for profit. White sugar is a product of profit, and industries, snack industries, beverage industries, energy drink industries, granola bar industries, cereal industries, they all use refined white sugar. So it is absolutely a product of profit, and in my opinion, it should be treated as a controlled substance. It should be treated the same way that we treat cigarettes and e-cigs and alcohol and drugs. And if you think about the white sugar thing, it kind of overlaps what we talked about with the milk industry. With cigarettes and e-cigs and alcohol, there's an age, limit. with white sugar, there's no age limit. I mean, it's in kids' Honey Nut Cheerios, it's in kids' mac and cheese, it's in pizza crust, it's in pizza sauce. Everything that kids eat, it's filled. It's filled with this unnecessary substance that should be controlled. And if the government truly gave a crap about its citizens, they would ban it. They would find an alternative, and they would let these other companies just, either these companies. Well, why isn't Coca-Cola looking into date sugar? Why isn't Dannon yogurt looking into raw sugar? Why are they continuing to use fructose and syrup and refined sugar? The government also funds the NIH, the National Institute of Health, where hundreds and thousands of scientists are taking government-funded money and doing research on how sugar leads to obesity and how sugar can. I mean, that's how we know all this stuff, because research has been done on it. And the government's funding it to try to find the answers, and the answers are very clear. Just get rid of the shit, ban it. We don't. There's no need for refined sugar.
What kills more people, assault rifles or sugar?
Yeah, that's a great question, right?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Wow. You guys have anything to add to this? I know it was a lot. I know it was pretty deep. We'll have links and everything set up in the show notes, but there was a lot of detail here, and I think I'm going to go through and I think I want to go and find. I need to do more research, but I want to find the granular date sugar. Mm-hmm. I want to see some of these different options, and just to really, it's done like just to really fully commit to using the correct kind of sugar that we're going to be using, and just in general less of it. And again, zooming out even further, as you said, Mike, a whole food version of what we're eating, more focusing on more of this and just less sugar in general,
Yeah, for many years I thought that a low carb diet was the healthiest thing, And now that I've adopted a whole food plant-based diet, I'm eating about 70 to 80% of my diet as carbs, like complex carbs, like fruit and whole grains and root vegetables. I'm in better shape than I've ever been.
Wow.
I'm training.
That's great.
I'm training for a marathon.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. I mean, like, I mean, because I'm on a high carb, high fiber diet, I'm able to run, 10, 15, 20 miles, and I have the energy to do it.
Yeah.
That's great.
I was never able to do that when I was on a low carb diet.
Right.
So, for me, it's been about.
That's awesome.
Firstly, I was inspired by the Terra Humata, which are if you don't know about them,
Copper Canyon?
Yeah, they're known as like super athletes. They're the best runners in the world. And traditionally, they eat a diet that's 70 to 80% carbohydrate, and so mainly it's like they'll be eating things like corn tortillas and beans. Simple. In some cases, they'll have running competitions that'll last for 2 to 3 days. They'll be running for 2 to 3 days with with torches at night, and people will hand them gourds filled with masa water, which is basically corn masa mixed with water and chia seeds. And this is what allows them to run hundreds of miles in a day.
Yeah.
These are like the best runners the world has ever seen.
And also wearing zero pitch shoes, I'm sure, sandals or something, right? Or
right. Barefoot.
Yeah.
So to me, that was something I had never seen before, and so what I'm discovering is that the traditional diets are the best diets, whereas today in Mexico, the leading cause of death is diabetes. And why is that? It's because of refined sugar and saturated fats. It's because of lard being put into the beans.
Yeah.
It's because of, the in the horchata, they've got all this added sugar and milk.
That was so good though, wasn't it?
I love horchata, but I mean, you could make your own piñole, which is way better. With your own cinnamon and masa flour, and you can make something healthy and delicious. So
we gotta do that recipe someday.
Yeah, it's easy.
Wow, that's great. Well, you guys, we have some really, really kick molasses episodes heading your way. The cardiovascular health. As you're talking, I want to hear more about your marathon training. I'm getting out and getting more active and I'm doing a little bit more biking in the mornings, which is good. And Brian and I went to go do that one day and got new tires, got new shoes. The bike's ready to go now. And it's something else that hits a little close home to here for a few of us is an episode we're working on called Why Are My Friends Dying? All of this heading your way soon. We are Plant-Based Riot. You are making the choice to live a longer, healthier, disease-free life. And I ask you, what are you then going to do with the extra disease-free years that you will be experiencing towards the sunset of your life career?
Ultra marathon.
Yeah, exactly. 80 years old, 90 years old, running like this. This is going to be you, Mike. So our producer, Greg Hennigan, a.k.a. the Mike Ditka of guitar teachers, proudly and does a really great job doing all the post work and editing it on these shows. So we want to give a big shout out, and you guys can as well say hello to Greg at gregsguitarlessons.com. I'm going to pick that up right there. Please say hello to Greg at gregsguitarlessons.com. I'm Dan Farnham with Plant-Based Riot. We are your weekly dosage of healthy lifestyle awareness here on Plant-Based Riot. You can follow Plant-Based Riot on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Plant-Based Riot. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Plant-Based Riot on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a few stars, a review, or tell a friend. Until next time, Brian. He knows what we're testing him right now.
Oh, what am I supposed to say?
Until next time. I just go with your gut on this one. Until next time, Write your own. No, write your own. This is the great bit. Nobody's hanging up yet.
Until next time. I went.
He's got no.
Come back to me. It's like the teacher that saw me dozing off just caught me.
What?
I'm like, I wasn't feeling well. Stop spending your hard-earned money on poison.
That's good.
Stay away from the sugar. Live longer. Teach your children the importance of nutrition and health, and value it, and value every second you have with them. And you can increase the time that you have with them by putting the right food in their body and in your body.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like
do I get extra credit for like being a part of this podcast today, or no? How does that work?
You do.
Can I defer it to somebody?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen, and we will see you on the next one. Buenas noches.